Blackbeard held the city captive by blockading essentially the Charleston Bay because he had
actual Blackbeard.
Yeah, Blackbeard. Yeah, like Teach, Edward Teach.
Real name Edward Teach. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah. He blockaded the city because he had a massive case of the clap and he needed the medicine, and he couldn't get the medicine anywhere else but Charleston. And so he was like, I'm going to hold this city hostage until you get me the medicine.
This is amazing.
Because I got a massive case of the clap.
This is a Main Hustle Media podcast.
Virtual Reality Studios. A new realm of creativity. Hello and welcome to Matcha and Masala, a weekly true crime podcast hosted by
Sharmane Fury, aka the Blazing Blurred,
and me,
Matcha.
Rhia Kaur, aka Masala today, mixed race mama in other places. Like, you can call me what you want, basically. We are just a couple of mixed mates musing over matcha, masala, and murder. So good. That's my favorite bit.
Why is it so joyful? Like, it's the stupidest thing. I wait for this moment.
It's the best part of the week. No joke.
I love it. I love it so much.
So, mini intros. I am Rhia Kaur. I'm a Desi Welsh girl living in London, and I am spreading my patented brand of mixed bestie energy in the internet spheres over on Mixed Race Mama. And then this is my other part of my work that I'm doing, and this is my favorite bit of my work that I'm doing, which is this podcast inside my own little virtual reality that now you're into. So who are you?
I am your Sir Auntie, Sharmane Fury, aka the Blazing Blurred. I am a Black Japanese British American currently living in Mexico. And like Rhia, I also am in the podcast world in Militantly Mixed, Blurred Comics, show called Queer and Far that's on hiatus. But literally, I just parts of me sometimes I'm like, I want to stop everything and just do this. Like, I'm living in matcha, masala, and murder right now so deeply. It gives me so much joy.
This is where we are. This is where we're putting all of our energies. And it's fun and it's exciting.
Fun.
So we're glad that you're here, and we're in episode 5 now.
Yeah, this is episode 5.
Which is amazing. So I'm hoping that we're sort of gathering a pace and people are sticking with us and finding out new things. And we won't test you on our mini intros, which seem to be
we're changing every time. We're getting our sea legs.
Yeah,
it's so funny too because I've never done this where I've like pre-done recordings. Well, that's not entirely true. I haven't like locked episodes ahead, like weeks and weeks ahead of when they're actually airing, and so this is kind of the first time that I've done that. And so like it's so much anticipation of waiting for it to drop and waiting to see like what are people going to say as we start to build an audience and stuff. And I know we're new, but like where we are at in recording versus where we are at in airing is so vastly different. Who knows what life's going to be like for us as we like, what if by now, 5th episode, we're super fucking famous and we have like 100,000 downloads already and shit like that. I don't know. It could happen. So yeah, but one of the things that I was going to say to you offline, but I was like, no, I'm going to wait until we're on the thing is like, I'm living with us every single day. I'm editing and things like that. And so I see you every day, even though you and I only see each other once a week now. And, I feel like I have been talking to you, so I failed to send you key information that you needed because I thought I'd been talking to you already. I just saw you last night. I saw you before I went to bed. I don't understand. Why don't you know all the shit that I have in my head? But that's because I didn't send you emails.
But we do talk. I mean, we kind of, because we're messaging all
We're
the
messaging
time.
each other and
So,
stuff like that. Yeah.
and we kind of, because we're messaging all
We're
the
messaging
time.
each other and
So,
stuff like that. Yeah.
and I like that we have the same brand of, oh shit, I just thought of something. And then
Yeah.
like, I'm going to send it to you now so I don't forget. But it's because that's what happens. If you don't send it then you forget.
You won't remember.
Yeah.
And and I don't want to overstate. I don't want to like exaggerate or be crazy or anything like that, or be too stalkery of a fan friend. But it's just, that's the energy, right? Like you're in the whatever the friendship equivalent to infatuation phase is, like whatever that is, that I'm neck deep in it. But like I have two branches of friendships. I have this pocket of friendships of friends that I've had for 30 plus years, like people I grew up with that I'm still friends with to this day, including one of my co-hosts, Sharmane Blurred Comics. We've known each other since we're 8. We know so much about each other that so little is a surprise.
Yeah.
And then my next branch of friends, so I've either known you for 25 to 30 years or 40 years even, or I've known you for 2 minutes and we're super close. Like through the podcasting world, I have created like this handful of friendships that have become like proper friendships, some of which I've seen in person, some of which I host a podcast with on the opposite side of the ocean. I have not seen in person yet. But like the way in which I feel like our friendship align, even though we're still getting to know, we're literally spending like the beginning parts of our recording each week, like continuing to get to know each other and build our relationship and stuff. But I feel like there's a shorthand that you and I already have that is very similar to my 25 plus relationships that don't really exist in some of my newer friendships. And to not have to explain, like, I'm so sorry, I'm about to do this again. I know I sent you 4 emails already. Random thought again before I forget. Ignore me till tomorrow. Like you and I say such similar things of like, we don't want to inflict ourselves on you, but we also know if we don't get this out, it won't get out. Because like I've been building this summary email for you for a week. I didn't hit send. I thought I was going to hit send on Sunday. I fucking forgot. And so, you know, like I didn't do it in the moment. And so you didn't get the information.
But I think it really works though, because it would be kind of exhausting if we had to be like, oh, sorry, this is just the way I do this, or this is how I work when I'm generally doing this. I think also, even though we don't know each other well, we're both really accepting of that's just how some people do stuff. You know, everybody's different, but also we have these similarities that make it easier to understand why we're doing what we're doing. Because trying to do a podcast on 2 different sides of the world in 2 completely different time zones at opposite ends of our day is a little bit of an out there plan, especially with someone that you just met online. Is like, I mean, a lot of people would say that's not a recipe for success, but I think we're proof that, you know,
it could be, right? Like it's so crazy because I was just thinking about last night. Like I'm literally in tank tops some of the times that we're recording, and you're bundled. Like we're in different seasons. You know, you're in a chillier weather right now. I'm in a tropical thing. Like even today, the fact that I'm wearing a full t-shirt is crazy because like I'm roasting right now. But I have my AC that I can't seem to control what temperature makes me too hot or too cold. But like you and I are on different seasons, different time zones, different countries, different parts of the world. Like everything about the formula that would make us work really well should not be working.
It shouldn't be happening and be
not
gelling.
It's going so I feel it's going so well.
I think we're doing a great job.
I think we are. And like, so I send you a message at 11 o'clock my time at night, and you're going to get it when you get it. I'm going to be asleep. You're going to respond to it while I'm asleep. And then I'm going to start to respond. It's going to be the end of your day. You're about to go to bed. And I'm just like, let me get this message out to you right before you go to bed. Like, it's very interesting.
It seems to work for us.
It's working.
You know, we're doing okay.
I'm enjoying it. And who knows, maybe it speeds up my process to getting on that side of the world. I don't know, but I'm having such a fun time doing this. And I'm learning things about how I process like rough shit slightly different than I've understood it in the past. Like, I think there's a weird therapy into kind of investigating something that is separate from us, removed from us from history or whatever. But some of the issues are things that we can deal with and talk about today. And then, you know, like my perspective shift, like even just from last week, the episode where you were sharing, I was like, so I have I have a line of murder that I'm okay with. You know, like there's certain things, you know, it's not like I didn't think that there were some things I would be okay with, but like some shit seems justified and I feel just fine about it.
We are learning about ourselves and about the world. You know, we're educating each other, ourselves, everybody else. Something for everyone.
Yeah.
So today we are going to start with, I'm going to do a bit of chit chat because this is a podcast that started off just being called Matcha and Masala because we both love the tea. And, you know, you are the Japanese and I am the Indian. And so we've got the Japanese and the Indian tea. And that's how we started.
Continue to refer to us as the Japanese and the Indian, because I definitely appreciate that.
You are the Japanese. I am the Indian. And the Japanese tea being the matcha. And, you know, the Indian tea being the masala cha, as I would call it. And that's what we're going to talk about is how we talk about tea. So obviously we were always going to include murder and true crime within our podcast. And then it suddenly dawned on us, that should be in the name because, you know, we're true professionals who had it all planned out from the beginning.
Like we didn't have our own separate shows, but still completely made all the first timer blunders. Amazing. You know, I'm so proud of us.
It's a learning curve. It's a learning curve. But, you know, so we have been talking about the murder that has come up, obviously, week on week. And I really thought it was time we did a little more tea talk. So to start at the very beginning, a very good place to start. So basically, there are very few words for tea in the whole world. And it's crazy that there are basically two branches of language etymology that have brought us the words that we know and love today. There are three. There's a third one depending on your flavor and what you kind of see as different branches. So I'll explain. It all starts back in Burma, which is apparently where it all started. And they had this word, which obviously I'm really apologetic that I don't know the correct pronunciations, especially because some of these words are centuries old and have actually changed. So maybe
and like
nobody
the language
knows.
Might not even exist anymore.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so maybe nobody knows how to say them, but the original
There'll be one 170-year-old Burmese person that's just like fucking asshole.
She's gonna send us a really angry email. How dare you? How dare you?
Do you know how long I've lived for you to say this word wrong?
You're just ruining my language. I'm really sorry to that lady. Please forgive us. But there was a word, la, which meant the tea plant, which was the name of the tea plant. And in Tibet and in different Thai dialects, and I think it's called Austroasiatic branches of language, that kind of tree, family tree.
Okay.
That's where that word came from. But then there's also this branch, which is te or tea. That's where, you know, they come from the same thing. And so we've all got different words that we, you know, around the world, but they all only stem from these same 2 or 3 branches. So you've got the tea te, and then you've got the cha chai, which is the other branch. And broadly speaking, wherever you are in the world, you're gonna call it some word related to one of those.
And I never realized that because you taught me this a while back, and I was like, oh shit, I didn't realize, because even in Japanese, it's ocha. So that would be closer to the chai.
Exactly. Yes. So cha comes first as one of the branches, and then there's chai, which stems from that. So like, for example, because I'm Punjabi, and in the Punjabi language, we call tea cha, but you in the West, people have heard chai because they hear masala chai or chai tea latte, or all these kind of bastardized things that you can
I don't know why that still bothers me. I know it's not my culture, but goddamn it. It's like calling miso soup because miso means soup.
Exactly.
Soup. So
I've got so many of these. Naan bread. Naan means bread.
Yes.
And chai tea latte means TT milk. Like, what are you talking about? Like,
honestly, I would rather it be called TT milk.
TT milk
than chai tea latte. Yes.
Not to be confused with titty milk, which is something entirely different.
Which we also support.
TT milk. Yes, we also support freedom of choice. So we call it cha, and then chai has been kind of really popularized because it's been, you know, hijacked basically, which has led to a lot of people correcting me if I say cha, and they're like, oh, I think you mean chai.
Gross. I fucking hate the world.
I'm like, I think I know what I mean. I think I know what I mean. Oh my god!
Tell the Punjabi person that they're not pronouncing the word correctly.
Yeah.
So I've had that happen to me in a Japanese restaurant. I ordered skiaki, which is how we fucking say it. And she goes, excuse me, this is the waitress. Excuse me, it's pronounced suki, yaki. No, bitch, it's fucking not. That's just the romanized characters dissemination so that English speakers can see what it said. It's skiaki. Fuck you. Get out of my face. I was so mad. That was 25 years ago. I still remember it.
yes. Good. Hold on to that anger. Never let it go. Oh my goodness. So basically the Portuguese, so this is the history of it, right? And I'm going to read from my little notes here. So the Portuguese brought the word cha to England because the Portuguese language had, the Portuguese people had a tea trade with the people who spoke Cantonese, and we're talking about the 1590s, right? Okay. And so they picked up on the sound of cha from the Cantonese language at the time, whatever the dialect was that was going on there. And then the tea tay came via the Dutch, which wasn't until like the late 17th century. And that came from the Malay word, which was close tea or tay. Yeah. So then so in northern China, there was cha, which came through South Asia, which is how obviously all of the Indian languages picked up on things differently, which also then branched out to Japan as well. And so chai was then basically invented to differentiate between the plant and the leaves, meaning cha, and then chai was if you put spices in it. So that's where they kind of made a differentiation, you see. Because at first, tea was this kind of nasty drink that was super bitter. And although it was like a delicacy and it was exotic, I hate the word.
Or like a health remedy.
Even. Yeah, and like a medicinal thing. But it tasted like medicine because it was awful. Yeah. And then in South Asia, they started putting spices in. I've got a whole other section, by the way, on the history of tea, of differently from the language, which I'll bust out one week. But basically, they started putting spices in to make that shit taste nice. And then people were like, this is a revelation. Like, I could drink this.
It's amazing how much spices have like changed the fucking world. Like, so many times, but
exactly. So all Indian tea is not chai, is what I'm telling you. And even if it's got spices in it now, it's still not chai. And just because, you might like yoga doesn't mean you know what you're talking about. Everybody in the West. You might have a yoga mat, but you don't know everything. So if you follow the trade routes, basically, is where you can follow the linguistic pathway. And that's why we have so many different variations of cha. There's a saying of how to remember this, right? It's tea if by sea and cha if by land, which only half rhymes, but I still find it satisfying.
I appreciate it. The effort is there. I love it. And there's not another word for land that would have matched.
I know. So. And I even tried to figure one out, but
like Terra,
I wasn't getting
that's obviously not going to work.
Yeah. So basically, languages that have a variation on cha or chai include like Arabic, which is like shtai, and then Croatian, Czech, Georgian, Greek. Do I remember all of these? Hang on. Romanian, Serbian, in Swahili, and then Thai dialects, Ukrainian, and Wolof, which is like an achai. They have got a vowel at the beginning as well. And then
so like Japanese.
You've got cha ones, which are more like Azerbaijan, Bulgaria, Hindi, Macedonia, Persian dialects, some Russian dialects.
That's interesting. So like where the Romani people would have evolved from.
No. Yes. Yeah.
I just that's a random fun fact that I know about how they evolved.
Well, from India, that's where they came from.
Because they start in India.
Exactly.
So if they go through all of those places and kind of end up Bulgaria and things like that, that would the charting of that language.
So those are all cha because that was all land migration of people. And then the sea guys, so anybody who says tea or te, variations. So you've got like the Basque language, English, Hungarian, Tamil, because that was slightly different. There wasn't as much land where it's located on the continent. And then like Afrikaans and I think Finnish, and then the Dutch, and even like some German, Esperanto,
Spanish too.
Catalan, Galician. Catalan. And then I think Haitian Creole has a word which is obviously comes from France then, a lot of the French colonies, and then you've got Ireland. So Luxembourg and Latvia and Spanish, and even in Yiddish. So that's the difference, basically. is it's either, it's tea if by sea and it's cha if by land.
I like that. That actually, plus it's really informative. Like it's,
well, thank you. I
it's a
thought
simple
so.
thing, but it's super informative. It's like if I can't guess what it might be, if I'm somewhere, and I know even a little bit about like colonization on boats and shit like that, or land, I could probably figure out what your tea is called, or get within the
some kind of ballpark, right? So,
well, with Japanese, like, yes, we're an island nation, but all the shit we got was from China, even though the Japanese will try to deny that. That we just sprung up out of nowhere. Japanese people being the special sacred whoever, whatever. But yeah, all of our shit comes from China and Korea. So like that's why we would have called it ocha instead of
and you see, that because you're the Japanese.
I'm the Japanese. So if you want to know about the Japanese, come to the Japanese.
Exactly.
Or the Japanese people come to the Japanese.
That is the branches of the word tea, te, cha, chai, and that's how you get that. And then tune in next week or in a couple of weeks when I might tell you the whole history of the tea, and I will start with the question: is tea the root of all evil?
I mean, you know what? Sometimes I kind of feel bad about how hard I go for tea because colonization is a motherfucker, right?
Oh yeah. So I got big. Right. Well, anyway, that's for another day. But yes, it's
all right.
Big.
Now I'm salivating for that. Do you want to do a bit of mug chat?
Mug chat. What are you working with this week?
So during COVID, we had a Secret Santa swap at my work, and the nurse who I was friends with at the time, she, she was the nurse, but also she would hear me yelling at my coworker to wash his hands all the time because he, instead of using a mask, would cover his mouth if he walked from his desk to the bathroom, and I'd be like, "Wear a mask, wash your hands." And so she caught me yelling at this old man so many times that for my Secret Santa swap, she got me this mug that says "Wash your hands." It's a giant mug. It's lovely. It's heavy as hell. So if you don't wash your hands, I can pop you in the brain with it and probably knock you out pretty strongly. But yes, it's a lovely, very heavy.
That's
and I've been feeling this way because I've been I don't want to say under the weather because it's not like I've been sick ill. I've been like medically, clinically ill in a way that I haven't figured out what it is yet. I've been in bed rest on and off for the last month and stuff. So washing my hands or having people wash their hands around me seems very important right now. So
very good.
And I only brought 6 mugs with me from the US. The rest of my mugs I had to give away since I left my country.
Mugs. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, which is crazy.
Why do I find that sad?
Right. Listen, Tristan was like, "You're gonna have to get rid of some shit." And since I'm a kid who grew up on welfare and poverty kid, I have a really hard time getting rid of possessions. Also, for stereotype purposes, one of the stereotypes that are true, Japanese do keep everything. And so it was like Tristan would be like, "This piece of paper says no on it. Why do you have it?" And I'm like, "Because it reminds me of when," and then I'll tell a story surrounding this sliver of paper that says no on it. So it was really tough for me. I had dozens of mugs.
I hope you could just give it to him every time he asks you something you don't want to do. Like, you can just hold it up.
Obviously, right?
I'm not even going to say it. I'm just going to hold
I don't
up
have
this
to say
piece
the
of
words.
paper.
It makes sense. So yeah, when we moved from the US to Mexico, I whittled my thing down to 6 mugs, which was the hardest thing in the world to do. I have so many regrets. But now I just have to rebuild my mug thing. So I'm going to tap out.
Sophie's choice. 6. You had to pick your favorite children, That's that's hard.
That's essentially
so I
what
have at the moment. I'm in a 1 in 1 out policy with mugs. Like if a new mug comes into my life, somebody is getting bumped out, and which is a hard place to be. I've only listen.
Stressful.
I'm a collector of things. I like things. I like pretties.
Yeah.
I like
I like pretties.
I like pretties. I don't know. Like even uglies can be pretties.
I understand this.
I'm glad somebody does. So like I have a lot of stuff and knickknacks, if you will, as one might call them here in the UK. And my mug collection I like, and different mugs serve different purposes, work better with different drinks at different times of day.
Or moods.
Absolutely. So I am actually, because I know that whenever anybody listens to this, it's going to be a different time of year, but we are nearing the middle of November. So pretty soon I will be doing my seasonal mug changeover. So I'm getting out my Christmas-based, winter-based, snowy winter-based mugs.
Okay.
So what I will do, in order to give everybody a full opportunity to live their mug destiny, some mugs will go away and some mugs will come out.
Oh, okay. So it's not like you get rid of it. It just goes boxed. It just
This is like a switcheroo.
Storage. Okay.
Yeah.
See,
so I'll bring them in and I'll bring them out.
This makes sense to me.
But
I respect
if you are going to be a new mug, somebody is going to, if I purchase a new mug or if I'm given a new mug, then somebody does have to go completely out, which is hard.
In the bin.
Donated or given away.
Okay.
To continue their mug destiny elsewhere. Yeah, but I'm going to do the seasonal swap over is what I'm saying. And I'm quite excited because then it's like seeing old friends. I'm going to bring out some guys I haven't seen since last year. And that's nice,
That's nice.
So
I like
today I'm working with just this kind of, this is a nice one for
I like the shape. Yeah, that's the shape.
Good
that's a comfort shape right there.
Yes.
The kind of mug I was telling you this the other day, like there's this mug that the shape of it I love, and I know it starts with a P, but I cannot find the word on the internet anymore. And I used to know it. Like I literally knew it like a month and a half ago.
How is this falling out of my head?
Gone from my brain. And listen, I know that people try to tell you life doesn't change that much, but when you hit 40, there is an immediate shift in your brain ability. I used to have the memory of an elephant. My short term is essentially gone now. I do not understand why
I can attest to this being true. Yeah.
This is so bizarre. And I didn't believe it, but it is 100% true. So yes, a month and a half ago, I knew the name of the style of mug that is my favorite style of mug. Small bottom, big top, curve, comfort, kind of shaped like a breast laying down on the table. I don't know. It's a comfort shape. It's a weird comfort shape. This is, I'm going to bash you in the head if you don't wash your hands because it's giant and it's huge and heavy. That is a comfort shape. I cannot find the name of this damn.
And you said that to me, do you know the name? And I didn't, because I didn't know it had a name. And I was excited to learn what it was, but we haven't found it out yet.
Well, now that'll be my mission is I'm going to fucking figure out what the name of every style of mug is. And that'll be one of my little topics one day, because now I'm obsessed with every time I pick it up, because I have this like two go-to cups, which are the same shape. They are both, they do both say keep calm and carry on. One's light blue, one's the Union Jack. And I've had them for ages. But they're like the ones like I couldn't bring myself to get rid of because it was like from my first trip to the UK and stuff. And so like I felt very attached to them, even though I have the issues that I have with the Union Jack. It's like I was a different person at that time.
I was going to say, I appreciate the mugs, but you wouldn't find a Union Jack in my household.
Yeah, like seriously, it's the weirdest thing. I went through a phase in my youth where like I had a whole bunch of Union Jack shit. And as I, have done a lot of like liberation work and stuff like that, I'm like, why do I have so many of these fucking flag? Like, I'm not a flag person. I don't understand. And so like I chipped away. And for some reason, when it came down to that mug, it was like the one mug I don't know why I couldn't get rid of. But every time
yourself a Welsh flag mug, because that's a fucking dragon.
There's a fucking dragon,
first of all. Flag in the whole world.
Listen. I have been looking for my favorite shape in that mug. Like there's so many options. I have a list of them sitting in my Amazon wish list right now. Well, because I'm just like, if I can't find the mug shape that I want, I'm going to get this one. And I'm like, oh no, I'm going to get this one. Cause there is a matte black one with the bright red embossed one. Ooh. I think I'm gonna have to get it anyway. But yes, I have been on, I have been looking for my Welsh mug.
That's a flag. That's a good flag.
And fun fact about the Welsh flag, the dragon, it's the only nation's flag that has what I'm going to say in quotation figures, mythical creature represented. Dragons are real.
Dragons are real. Hell yeah.
They're super real. But it's technically, that's one of the things that it's known for is the quote, in quotes, mythical.
So because the Scotland, not on the flag, but the emblem of Scotland is a unicorn.
Yes.
That's fucking cool too.
And again, listen, we're talking about colonized white people. So I know that I'm Welsh and Scottish and like the weeest bit of Irish, even though my family has a full Irish identity. It's hilarious. It's like the least thing that they are. But whatever, it's fine. It might have been the last place they were, basically. But yeah, they're not proper Irish. But anyways, I ride for the colonized white folks because they're against the oppression too and all that kind of stuff. And they've been showing up strong right now in
absolutely, exactly.
In the stuff about everything that's
the
happening.
Irish get it.
Yeah, the Irish are, man. I've never wanted to move to Ireland so fast. Like I was just like, if this is what it's like, I'm like, which side? Like I'm trying to differentiate between the UK MPs and the you know, the southern. Like I'm like, I'm riding with these folks. But like the fact that it's the Welsh and the Scottish that have these, like, quote again, I'm also gonna deny that unicorns aren't real.
You can't prove it.
You can't prove they're not real. So yes, first of all that, and then also they're 100% real, and your mind is not equipped with the ability to understand that they exist. They just like mermaids and stuff.
Thank you. Yes, mermaids. Amazing.
If I was starting my own country today, 100% my flag is a mermaid. Just so you know.
Yeah.
But I appreciate that the Scottish and the Welsh both ride so hard for the dragons and the and also like just generally almost all my races or ethnic groups. Japanese dragons are big. Welsh dragons are big. You know, so it's like
that's a nice little crossover.
I respect it. We have different kinds of dragons, but they all serve their purpose, and I appreciate it. Do you want to get into today's story?
I really do. I'm excited.
Okay, I am excited about this one because it's a fucking mess. Let me just start there. This story is a fucking mess, and I hope I can get it all in one, but if I can't, I would not be opposed to doing a multi-part story on this one. Ooh. Because what we are dealing with in this story, there is possible, let's see, how do I start this? Okay, how about this? I'm going to first tell you the legend. Ooh. Which in and of itself is so fucking brilliant that when you finish the legend, you're like, I don't care if this isn't real. This is the story. And you would understand why it would persevere through time. Then I'm going to hit you with some shit that was happening in the world at the time, the history at the time, to put into context how the legend and the reality, the circumstantial reality, because it's from 1819. So it's been a bit. The reality story is so like, yes, that's the world. The world sucks, and this is why this happened. But the legend is amazing.
Ooh.
So it's a mess. It's a mess because the real story makes me angry and sad. The legend is just like, yes. So I'm feeling this. This is how I feel.
Okay.
To get started. What we have is a story that accidentally has tea in it. I didn't do that on purpose. It just surfaced as part of the story. A possible mixed race assailant, a murderess, if you will.
They said it couldn't be done. We couldn't fit tea and mixed race into the murder.
We are the only people who can do this. So I am going to share with you the tale of Lavinia Fisher, America's first female serial killer, and her husband, John. Tea's ready. Shall I be mother?
Excellent freeze frame.
I'm going to share with you the legend of the beautiful and dusky Lavinia Fisher, who would lure who she believed to be rich men or slightly wealthy men into the comfort of her and her husband's inn outside of Charleston, South Carolina, in the United States. We refer to this place as either the Wayfarer's Inn or the 6 Mile Inn because it was 6 miles outside of Charleston, which for every mile marker outside, there would be an inn, a home that people could rest in, water their horses, etc. 1 mile, 2 mile, 3 mile, 4 mile, 5 miles. Okay. So it is known as the 6 Mile Inn or the Wayfarer's Inn or the Wayfarer's 6 Mile Inn.
Sure.
But she would lure these rich men into her inn and set them to comfort by both flirting and cooking an amazing meal for them, like a bed and breakfast style. You're gonna get fed, you're gonna sleep, you're gonna water your horse, you're gonna be on your merry way. And her either cowardly or super supportive, loving husband, or sheepish husband, John, depending on which part of the legend you're going to tell, who would sit there and basically be like emotionally cuckolded. So, not sexually, but just like he'd sit in the corner while she flirts with him and feeds men, to lure them into comfort so that when they would go to sleep in the inn, John and Lavinia could do the most horrible of horribles to them, according to the legend. So basically, this is such a good story. I can't even deal with.
I'm so in.
I cannot deal with this. Okay, so this is taking place in the early 1800s. She would have been born somewhere roughly around 1780 or so, 1790. But the story that is going to lead us to the crimes is going to happen in about 1819. Mm-hmm. So here's the bit that is slightly legend, because it's unsubstantiated, but it's the kind of circumstantial evidence that you kind of can't look away or deny. So I'm going to put it as part of the legend, but I'm also going to say that it's most likely part of the real story, possibly. And that is that Lavinia, and again, I have described her as dusky, right? I have described her as beautiful. She was known as being a particular kind of beauty that people were always in awe of. She was very likable and personable, and people just liked her. But she was known to be slightly darker than the average white woman. So it is believed that she was probably passing for white. Mm-hmm. And the reason why this has come up is because even though it's 1819, which there absolutely would have been findable records for this, there's no record of Lavinia Fisher and John Fisher marrying, but there is records of Lavinia Fisher prior to her supposed marriage. So it is believed, based off of certain parts of history that is kind of searchable, that she was owned, an enslaved woman, an enslaved biracial woman, owned by the uncle of John Fisher, and that John Fisher lived on the same plantation with his uncle and may have fallen in love with her. And as a way to make sure that shit didn't happen, uncle sent Lavinia and another woman, I think they refer to her as Sarah, although there's been so many times it's just like, and another slave woman, into Charleston, sold them off to somebody else. And John was like, fuck that. And went to Charleston too, because he's like, I'm not going to be separated from Lavinia. And so he ends up in Charleston as well. And then eventually they're just living together as husband and wife. So it's believed that they are common law, because there is no historical record of their marriage, despite the fact that there would have been at that time. There's plenty of marriages at that time that would have been. But because they both had the same name, and I'm not just the Japanese, I'm also the descendant of American enslavement. We keep the last names of the plantations that we come from. My birth last name is a plantation name from my side of the family, which is Franklin. And so it's just believed that, because she had that name, she's probably someone that was owned by the Fisher family, and therefore, and being that if she could pass as white, most likely biracial, most likely a relative. Please, John. Because if John's uncle was the plantation owner, perhaps he was her father, and John would have been the nephew, so they would have been cousin marriage, which would not have been super uncommon in that time anyway. And honestly, still to this day in many cultures, cousin relationships are still fine. And according to many studies, and don't ask me why I become obsessed with this, in Britain, first cousin still is genetically fine. it's what in Britain? I'm sorry. It's okay. Yeah, Britain, right? Like trying to justify super related royal family. There are tons of studies from the UK that will show that genetically it's not that bad to even be first cousins. The problem is siblings, but even to a degree, it's not that problem. The problem is one of your children, if you're siblings, is probably going to have some problems. Not all of them.
But I mean, also, ew. Like, I mean,
yeah. Straight,
before we even get to the stage of having the babies,
let's make it clear. Ew.
Then ew.
But there was a very intriguing documentary series about like siblings that were adopted out that found each other in life in the UK and then like married and had babies, and then they're like the men keep getting arrested because they found out that they're siblings, but they're like, I didn't know she was my sister when I fell in love with her. I was adopted. Super intriguing. It's so weird.
Yeah.
But intrigue. But I digress. I'm not saying there's records that these fools are cousins and married. I'm just saying she's probably an enslaved woman, and if she's biracial, makes more sense that she would be either the plantation owner or the overseer's children, because overseers also did that shit. But she would have taken the name of the plantation,
and that's why they have the same name, even though they're not legally married.
Yeah, and so it's easier for people to just accept them as married because she has records to show she's Lavinia, and he has records to show that he's John Fisher, and boom. Okay. That's why she's probably a mixed race woman. So that's just like a little pin in it. It's not a big part of the story, but as a mixed person, I was like, oh, a white passing biracial, you say.
And who hasn't, as a mixed race woman, been some point called Dusky?
Yes, right.
Dusky by someone.
Both people on the screen, in fact, at this moment.
We've all been there.
You gotta love the language. It's similar to like when you did Kate's story, and it's like she was a strongly built, kind of thing. It's like the language in which they choose to describe people. Like as soon as I saw Dusky, I was like, first of all, I know a white man wrote this, and yes, a white man had written it. But like, you just knew. It's just so. Ugh. But yes, this beautiful.
As just a couple of dusky beauties, we sympathize with where she's coming from.
Dusky beauty to dusky beauty, we get it. So they had the inn, and people would either be coming into Charleston or going out of Charleston, would need a place to rest, and they would come and stable their horse, have a meal, go to sleep, wake up in the morning, and travel on. At this time, historically, there was one of the first major economic downturns that happened in the US was happening at that time. And so Charleston, which had been a very booming place earlier, was starting to suffer. One, because of pirates, which I fucking love. That's another thing that I have a pirate thing. Certain pirates are known to have like either use that as a port to sell off goods and things like that, have stolen or whatever. But one of the best stories about pirates and Charleston in particular is Blackbeard held the city captive by blockading essentially the Charleston Bay, because he had
actual Blackbeard.
Yeah, Blackbeard, yeah, like Teach, Edward Teach,
real name Edward Teach. Yeah, amazing.
Yeah, he blockaded the city because he had a massive case of the clap. And he needed the medicine, and he couldn't get the medicine anywhere else but Charleston. And so he was like, I'm going to hold this city hostage until you get me the medicine.
This is amazing.
Because I got a massive case of the clap. And so like, I think I don't remember the full story, but I think it's like 2 weeks or something like that they like legit couldn't get anything in and out of the harbor because he was like, I'm not fucking kidding. You're going to get me this medicine. And so, the part of the story that I don't know is like, did he ever clear his clap, or did he just get satisfied with a dose and move on with his life? That part I don't know. But there's also a story about whether or not Charleston is also the location that Blackbeard's treasure could be buried and things like that too. There's stories around that. So, but Charleston has a pirate history. It's got a Civil War history. It's a whole bunch of stuff. But at this particular time, because of piracy was kind of coming to its end, desperados were definitely a presence in Charleston. And so they started to have a massive series of like highway robbery, essentially. Like if you were going in or out of Charleston, you were at risk because bandits might pop out of the woods and get you for your stuff. And they would refer to them as like land privateers or something. So they were, a land pirate or a sea pirate. in both cases. So T if by sea and cha if by land, same type of thing. You got your land pirates and you got your sea pirates, and it was really having an impact on Charleston at the time.
That's right. It all ties in, folks, and it's
It
all
ties in,
all planned perfectly.
completely planned. So there was a lot of people that would go missing, and the last known location that they would have stopped in would have been the 6 Mile Inn. But literally, like, it's the last motherfucking spot before you go out of town. So anything could have fucking happened, but reputation was just like the last time anybody knew they were somewhere was the 6 Mile Wayfarers Inn. And so it started to be believed that Lavinia and John were doing nefarious things in their inn. And so here's where the story gets like legend wise super juicy. Yeah. Like just
we really need a sound effect button for these times.
I need a board. Yeah, I need to get a soundboard. That's a Patreon sponsorship or something. I'm eventually going to need to get a soundboard for this thing. So one evening, there's a man who needs to stop and water his horse. And depending on the way you hear the story, either he's with a boy, which is probably an enslaved child that he has tending to his horse, or the child is not a part of the story. But in both cases, he needs to stop to water his horse. And Lavinia, seeing that he has nice clothing and things like that, plus he has an enslaved child with him and everything like that, he probably has a wee bit of money. And so she tries to convince him to come in for a meal. And he's like, no, I just need to water my horse and I'll be on my way. And she's like, the horse will take time to get tended to. Why don't you just come in and, have a chat, take a load off. I'll give you a light snack or whatever. He comes in and she makes him a nice meal, and he's eating away, and they're having great conversation. And all the while he's so engrossed and engaged in this beautiful, dusky, attentive woman, who's an amazing cook, by the way. But in the corner is John. Who will not stop staring at him in just like a very depressed and like I hate you kind of way. And so this guest, John Peoples is his name. Again, another story with multiple Johns in it. John Peoples is just like, Mr. Fisher is weird, but Lavinia is just so wonderful. So he engages in the conversation, and after the dishes get cleared and they continue the conversation, John Peoples does realize, he is a little bit tired. So he might stick around for the night. And she says, okay, great. Before you go to bed, let me just give you a cup of tea, relax, and then, you can go to bed. So that's where the tea comes in. That ends up being episode. Well, John Peoples, according to legend, absolutely hated tea. But Lavinia was so beautiful and kind, he could not bring himself to not accept the tea. So he just, when she wasn't looking, would pour it out into a plant or something nearby. So it appeared that he drank, but he thought there was something weird about the tea. He also started to think there was something weird about the attention he was getting, given that our John was in the background being weird and cockledy, and Lavinia was so aggressively attentive. So he starts to get suspicious, again, according to legend, that he might be robbed or murdered that night, but he still decides to stay in the inn.
Yeah,
this is so silly.
Why not,
right? So what also clues him into this is probably a weird place is that, according to legend, both John and Lavinia walk him to bed.
Okay, an escort. Lovely.
An escort service. Make sure that he gets in, he gets there and he's all situated, whatever. We'll have a fine breakfast for you in the morning and you can go on about your merry way. Doors close. John and Lavinia move on. And Peoples is sitting there. I'm just going to call him Peoples to differentiate. He's sitting there going, that was very weird. I don't think I want to be in bed. Again, you could have left at any time, bro. But instead, he decides to sit in the chair near the window facing the door, just in case he's going to get robbed or, killed in the night. And he does nod off, but he's awoken by this terrible crash. And when he opens his eyes, he sees the bed fall into the floor, into a gaping hole in the floor. What? Alarmed, he jumps out of the window, gets on his horse, and fucks off.
The bed fell through the floor, and he jumped out the window.
He would have been, I think, on the first floor anyway, but he jumped. He's like, oh, and he jumps out the window and he runs away, right?
Okay.
And
so that's what it takes for him to take, for him to leave.
Not that I'm already suspicious I might get murdered, but like legit. Hey, beds don't normally fall out to the floor into the cellar. That's
Sure.
weird. And he,
so you know what he did? He legged it.
He legged it. He legged it. That's one of my favorites.
I'm so making it a thing.
Yes, we're legging it, going for it. So yeah, he legs it, and John and Lavinia rush in, and they see, oh wait, there's no people, so there's nobody to kill. That's one part of the legend.
Oh.
The other part of the legend is that this happens so many times that either John and Lavinia would wait until, what I didn't say, my bad. The tea that was a little bit off for John Peoples, who doesn't like tea, was oleander tea. Oleander being a poisonous thing, but it wasn't a big enough dose to kill people, which would have been easier than a bed falling through the cellar.
Yeah.
But just enough to make them sleepy and semi-paralyzed.
Just so a special bedtime brew.
So by the time you go to bed and you fall asleep and you might not be able to move too much, John could come in and stabby, and then rob you, and you'd be done, right? Seems super complicated because if you already have poison, which
just use the poison.
First episode, like, that seems like the easiest thing to fucking do. If you already have poison tea, you might as well just finish it out that way. But no, let's do it bloody. And we'll either creep into the room and stabby, or we'll build this elaborate fucking contraption that would drop the bed into the cellar onto an opening that would, a bed of spikes would be below.
What?
So that your person would fall from the, so I'm imagining it's kind of like a reverse Murphy bed. So instead of going up, it would go down, and you would fall into the hole onto a bed of spikes, hopefully impaling you quickly. But if you didn't die, John would have to go down into the cellar and axe you up.
That's like some Goonies booby trap shit.
It's too much. It's too big.
You've gone too big.
It's too big. Like, if you're fans of New Girl, the character Bishop is either
Winnie the Bish.
Too big. Winnie the Bish either pranks too big or too small. It's either
Frank
a blueberry
Sinatra.
in your shoe, Frank Sinatra, what a blueberry in your shoe, or it's like, I'm gonna hit you in the throat with a ski. This is the level of it's too much. You had fucking oleander tea poison. You could have just poisoned them. They fell asleep. You robbed them. You got rid of the body. But no, let's do this complicated and build a fucking contraption that will slide your body down from a bed onto a bed of nails. And if you don't die, I gotta axe you up.
So they just got ronded.
Yes, you just got ronded. That's an escalation. Brilliant. It's too fucking much. But this is the legend. So John Peoples sees this bed. Fuck, he legs it through the window, and he's all the way gone into Charleston to be like, bro, these motherfuckers were gonna kill me. Who knows what happened to poor slave boy, because John Peoples fucked off, right?
Yeah.
But this is the start of what makes people go, oh, there's been so many people reported missing after the 6 Mile Wayfair Inn. We're gonna get a mob together and put an end to this shit. And this is one of the stupid things about American history, is that we have this period of time of vigilante justice that is sort of legal. It's like semi-legal, based off of two possible things. There was a law in, I don't believe it was South Carolina, somewhere else though, Lynch's law. The person who wrote it name was Lynch, which is why we call lynching today.
Yeah.
Which was essentially saying, like, if you could kind of prove that somebody did you wrong, you could collectively, punish that, you can gather a collective to punish that person without much recourse by the law, but you had to have been able to prove that they have done something wrong. So that's one version of it. Another version of it is just like, essentially the dehumanization of anything that is other, right? So enslaved people, runaway enslaved people, bandits and such like that, like they're just deserving of whatever punishment you can give. So if you can give it to them before we can give it to them, great. So there's different versions of this, but they eventually over time just kind of be melded together into this thing called Lynch's Law, which is why a lynch mob would be formed.
Yeah.
And so a lynch mob is basically formed after Peoples gets back to Charleston and tells the police what happens. And so they start marching up the road out of town to get to the 6 Mile Inn. But for some reason they go to 5 Mile Inn first, which also had a bit of a reputation. And they threaten to burn the place down, and the people that are inside there are like, fuck you, leave me alone, go away. So they burn it down to the ground, and some people make it out and some people don't. And the people who do make it out, depending on what part of the legend you're hearing, either just like get caught and beat up by the mob, or they leg it down to the 6 Mile Inn. And so they're supposedly all there at the time that the mob tires of what they do at 5 Mile Inn. And it would have been close enough in distance that the big flames, because they burned down the house and the outbuildings and everything like that, that by the time the people at the 6 Mile Inn see it, they're like, oh shit, they're burning down stuff or whatever. And if the gang who is supposedly in the 5 Mile Inn make its way to 6 Mile, and they're like, oh my gosh, they're killing us all. They know what we do. This is where the story just gets completely wild and crazy. So evidently there is this huge gang of highway robbers that are spread out over the 6 Mile Inn and the 5 Mile Inn. And the guy who owns the 5 Mile Inn's last name is Hayward. I think it's Edward. I have it in my notes. It's fine. I'm into the story. I'm just gonna tell it. So I'm just gonna call him Hayward. Hayward and his gang are all in the 5 Mile Inn, and Lavinia and John are supposedly members of this gang, but they're in their own inn and they do their own shit or whatever. Maybe they split the winnings across everybody. Maybe they don't. It's not really clear. But they're all kind of in cahoots together, according to the legend. And so the ones that make it free get down to there, and they're like, basically last stand because they're coming our way or whatever. The mob ends up making its way to 6 Mile Inn, and they basically say the same thing: come out, or we're going to burn your place down. And since they could see the flames from the other place, they're like, no, don't burn our place down. John Fisher ends up surrendering because he loves Lavinia so much. He does not want to see her die or get in combat or anything like that. And so even though the other guys are kind of pissed off at John's cowardice, other people would view that as he loves Lavinia too much. He doesn't want her seen. So they all kind of get carted away in the mob down to town. But the mob leaves behind a solo guy in the 6 Mile Inn. So mind you, they just burnt down without any provocation. They just burnt down 5 Mile Inn. They're at 6 Mile Inn, and they say, David Ross, you stay here and make sure no one fucks with the 6 Mile Inn, and we're gonna go get these people down to the police station or whatever. And so David Ross stays behind. They all head down towards town, and this part is not explained. How the gang gets free from either the mob or police, we have no idea. But there was some fighting and things like that or whatever. But for whatever reason, the mob goes back to Charleston, and overnight, Lavinia and the gang end up back at 6 Mile Inn, and they start roughing up David because they're like, you're trespassing on our place or whatever. And they try to kick him out. And he's like, well, don't kick me out. I want to go get my stuff first. And he tries to go back. They push him out of the house. He tries to go back in the house. And so here's where language and descriptions are important, right? Lavinia is also not only known as a beautiful and dusky person, she's also known as very petite. But David ends up recounting what happens to him, saying this large, and he didn't say strongly built, strong woman just mollywopped the hell out of him, and then boxed his head through a glass window, and choked him out a bit. And somehow he still gets away. They shooting at him and stuff like that, but somehow he gets into the woods and he gets away. He makes it back to Charleston. He's like, you're not gonna believe what the fucking gang did to me or whatever. So now we have two things happening. We have John Peoples was almost killed, and David Ross was almost killed. And so the gang still continues to stay at 6 Mile Inn, even though they know a lynch mob and the cops are going to come for them. They just let David get away. So they kind of get ready for like fighting and stuff like that. And eventually the cops come, and again, it feels like a retelling of the same type of story, where in the court records, these two things get said. David reports these two things being said by two different people, but it's the same thing. As one, he says he tries to go back into the house, and John Fisher yells, "You damn dirty rascal. If you try to come back in this house, I'll kill you." And then he also says that after he gets away from having his head boxed through a window, and this, that the woman was the most aggressive of all of the criminals that were harming him, which again, he's claiming is Lavinia, but he's describing this very tall, strong woman, which is not Lavinia. There is another woman that gets arrested at some point, and but she falls out of the story. So she's like there and not there at the same time. So it's hard. It's hard to say. But I'm assuming that if this did happen, it's probably this other woman,
right?
Again, second woman that's named and not, or unnamed and not Lavinia, that would have done this. Then he says, as he's running through the woods and they're shooting at him and he's getting away, a different man, which is Hayward, which is the owner of 5 Mile Inn, says, "You damn dirty rascal." Like, if we find you again, we're going to kill you. So he basically attests the same thing, which I don't know how common it was to call someone a damn dirty rascal in 1819. But like, it seems weird that that's part of the same story within a few seconds of each other, that this two men would yell this out at him or whatever. But he gets back to town, tells the sheriff what happens, whatever. Okay. Again, no story as to how smooth this went, but for whatever reason, they arrest everybody. Okay. So we had a mob burn down a house, and we had a mob overtake a house, and then somehow we just easily get arrested. I don't know. This is the legend. It has no explanation as to how this happened. So roughly about 4 people are kind of arrested the first time, but over time they keep adding people to the gang. So if someone that they don't particularly like gets arrested, all of a sudden they're part of the same highway robbery gang. And it is reported that they attempted to murder at least 2 people. This is what the charges are that they get brought up with. So they're in jail and awaiting their trial and everything. And at this time, they're in this notorious jail in Charleston, which is called the Old City Jail. It's essentially a above ground dungeon. It's the worst conditions, no flowing water, no plumbing system. Usually the plumbing is like hay piled into the corner. There's vermin everywhere. Yes. It's very like lovely conditions. The cells are about like 6 by 8, but you'd be crowded in them, and they were kind of co-ed. So it's just pretty much like you got sent wherever you got sent. So I'm imagining, and have seen just a few things that said there would have been loads of SA happening by both other prisoners and the guards of any women that were jailed. But Lavinia, John, and Hayward all get put in the same cell together. Ooh. And because of conditions, and because she's a married woman and things like that, and because she was such a good flirt, she ends up convincing the guards to put them in a different part of the prison, which is slightly less guarded. It was the debtors part of the prison, so not the I committed violent crime part, but the debtors part. So this is on a second floor. It's in another area. It's not very heavily guarded, and there's a window to the cell. And so John, and I think this is Hayward, is they build a rope out of like prison sheets and things like that, and they devise a way to escape. And so first Hayward gets out, then John is on his way down, but then the rope snaps at about 20 feet. He plummets to the ground. He doesn't really get hurt, but now he can't get Lavinia down. And so they run off. Lavinia's stuck in there by herself. And over the next few days, their plan, the 3 of them, was to jump on a boat to Cuba and just never come back and move on with their lives. But because Lavinia was still trapped and John loved her so much, he was like, I can't leave her. So they had remembered that just recently there had been another prison break where the prisoner had bribed the guards, like, the equivalent of $500, which would have been a lot of money at the time, to be able to escape. And so it was a whole big scandal. So they were trying to get together that amount of money so that they can bribe someone to get Lavinia out. And they were living under like an overturned canoe type boat type of thing, while they were like either robbing and or getting stuff or whatever. And the reason why they get caught is because they're hungry. So they take some of the money that they've been thieving, and they go to a fucking general store, and they're getting some things. And the guy, the proprietor, is just like feeling a little suspicious about them. So he has his attendants man the store while he follows them for a little while. And he ends up seeing them crawl underneath a boat. So he has somebody nearby stand and watch the boat while he goes to get the police. The police find them. And the story is one of two things. According to legend, John realizes that Lavinia can't get out, and he immediately turns him in. Or him and Hayward for a few days are trying to get money, hide under this boat, get caught, and get sent back to jail, or whatever. And so they end up getting put in a harder cell to run out of. I think John gets caught. Hayward doesn't. Hayward fucks off somewhere. And he kind of comes in out of the story because he's both tried, but also listed as not present, but also ends up in jail. So it's really weird. Like, I don't understand what happens with Hayward. But at least with John and Lavinia, that's what's going on. So for the next, their escape was like right after an appeal to have their case reviewed or something like that. So they're in jail for this extended period of time. They don't have a proper trial. They have what is equivalent in the US to a grand jury, which is essentially 12 people review your case to see if it's worth indicting.
Okay.
And that wasn't what it was called back then, but that's essentially the comparison to modern time of what they went through. So they had the grand jury portion of it that says they was worth to be indicted. So what they were appealing, so they were in prison while this happened. Every other member of the gang got bailed out, including Hayward at one point, but Hayward ended up doing something else. That's why he ended up back in jail with them before he fucks off. So they're appealing the indictment, I think, is essentially what it amounts to. And so they're still stuck in prison during that time. Everybody else was able to get bailed out for like $100 or $200, which is still substantial money in this time period, especially given that there's a huge economic downturn. And obviously, if you're considering these people highway robberies, it seems odd that you would take money from them because you would assume that would have been stolen money. But I digress. Different story. So they're waiting for this like appeal process or whatever. And during this time, different factions are either massively in support of the Fishers or massively against them. White women really rally for Lavinia because they end up saying that they're up for a hanging case. And that didn't make sense because this shit. They're charged with vigorous assault and attempted murder of David and John Peoples. That's what they're charged with.
Okay.
But what they get sentenced to is highway robbery. Now, this is what doesn't make sense. Attempted murder is not a hanging case. Highway robbery is. And if you're committed and if you're convicted of attempted murder, you would go to prison for however long they end up putting you in prison. But your possessions would still be your possessions. Although there is an abandonment thing that if you're not on your property for at least a year, it would revert to the state. But that's a slightly slippery little thing. Just have that little nugget in your head.
Okay.
Separate from that, highway robbery is a hanging offense. And immediately your possessions revert to the state. Again, keep that little nugget in your head. So for whatever reason, they're indicted and convicted of vigorous assaults with intent to kill. But they're sentenced to highway robbery, which is a hanging case. So that's why they're so vigorously appealing, because they're like, I don't understand what's happening. If this is what we've done, we're meant to have done, why are we getting done up for this? And during that time, the city is trying to get them to repent. And so they send like pastors and priests and all kinds of people to try to counsel them to both like come clean and alleviate their soul. But just knowing like, you're going to be hung. So it's hell for you or heaven, depending on how you move. But Lavinia is so convinced that as a woman, there's no way she's going to be hung. There was a law at this time that you couldn't hang an unmarried woman, which is so bizarre. But you could hang a married woman, but no women were being hung at this time. Like, this is not a thing. It was just kind of on the books. So white women were nervous, and they banded together in sort of this like kind of pre-suffrage level, like, oh shit. And they're like fighting to not have Lavinia hung because they're concerned that if a white woman is hung, a white married woman is hung, it's a slippery slope, and it could happen to any of them, right? So they're pretty actively trying to get her at least downgraded to something else that's not hanging. But again, there's this, side note that she's possibly a white passing person that maybe some people know about. And so maybe that's why, while politically they, we understand why the white women are fighting, and the powers that be might be being like, this dusty bitch. You know what I'm saying? So it could be both of those things happening at the same time, which is why they pursue it so hard. The other part is the land that the Fishers owned was originally Hayward's, but he had so much debt that he ended up having to, he got into something with John Fisher's uncle. And so to squash that debt, they gave that land that the Fishers were on to them for the 6 Mile Inn thing. So 5 Mile Inn and 6 Mile Inn essentially were originally owned by Hayward, but now it's just 5 Mile is Hayward and 6 Mile is the Fishers. And by extension, like the uncle, I guess, kind of squashed it and gave it to them. So it might have been a thing of just like, at this point, he knew he couldn't do anything about John and his dusky woman. So he just like, as long as you're not in Virginia, you know what I'm saying? Like, just let's call it. But this was also very critical land. And I'll tell you why later. Just remember that it's important land. And what those little nuggets earlier about reverting to the state. So we have these attempted murderers that are being put up for highway robbery. They lose their appeal, and it's definitely going to happen. You are now going to be hung. And they set the date for February 4th, 1820. They were originally arrested February 18th, 1819.
Oh, wow.
There's also some kind of fun run or some shit that happens, a thing in the town that is a big deal. And people were like, we don't want to cast shade over the fun thing in this town that same week. So can we not hang a woman and her husband that same week? And so the courts were like, you know what? You're right. Let's go ahead and push it back. They were going to push it back a week, but for whatever reason, they pushed it back to, guess what date? February 18th, 1820. A whole year since they were abandoned their home.
And they've been out of their property.
They've been out of their property. So, little puzzle pieces are coming together. So they pushed their execution date to the 18th. Until that time, like, again, they're still hitting really hard. Like, white women are trying to get Lavinia downgraded. The priests and the pastors are coming to try to alleviate their soul. And John starts to repent. He maintains his innocence for the crimes that he's convicted of, but he repents for any sins basically that he had committed. And he wanted to make sure that his soul was right and Lavinia's soul was right at the same time, because he wanted to make sure that when they died, they went to heaven together. And so he keeps trying to get Lavinia to repent, and she just becomes outrightly a totally different person. So the person everybody knows is this charming, beautiful, flirtatious woman. Now she's cussing up a storm. She ain't giving a shit about nobody. Fuck your religion. All of you are ridiculous and stupid anyway. So she's fighting tooth and nail. She's not having it. So the legend has her state that she insists on being, I forgot, that even while they were being tried, while they're being arrested, eventually they go back and burn the 6 Mile Inn. I can't remember that part.
Okay.
So both buildings, like, evidence be damned, both buildings are burnt down. They've been in prison now or jail now for a year. It's about to be hanging time. And so she states, I refuse to be hung in anything but my wedding dress, which again, your house was burned down. But she's thinking that if they hang John first, she becomes unmarried. And if she's in a wedding dress, and there's a priest presiding, she might be able to convince a young soul to marry her on the spot so that she doesn't get hung. This is part of the legend.
She's already wearing the attire.
And she's already wearing the attire. So, like, obviously, when you're looking at a woman about to be hung in a wedding dress, you're going to be like, I better marry her.
I'm going to marry her.
Obviously, that would be happening. This is all part of the legend. And so the day comes that they're finally getting hung. They're supposedly like in this paddy wagon kind of cart together. She's supposedly in her wedding dress, and they're giving their last goodbyes and things like that. But she's also cussing up a storm because he's trying to get her to repent, and the priest, the pastor is too. And she's like, nah. She's like, I'm not gonna be killed anyway. This is just show, blah 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 blah. So by the time she gets up to the scaffold, she's now convinced, oh shit, they actually might kill me. And so she starts like fighting and screaming. John walks up the plank like he's supposed to, but she has to be dragged and carried. She's fighting, she's punching, she's cussing.
Yeah.
And everybody's just like, this woman is wild. Again, like that a person who is about to die wouldn't fight and shit like that is so bizarre. But everybody's like, oh my God, I can't believe she's behaving this way. She's just about to get hung. So she finally gets on the scaffold. They put the nooses around and everything like that. John ends up doing a public statement in which he repents all his sin. He does declare his innocence. He repents for his other sins, and then towards the end, he kind of apologizes for everything that happened, which ends up muddying that a little bit or whatever. And he does one last appeal to Lavinia. They end up embracing. They give him a chance to embrace and hug and say their goodbyes or whatever. But she's like, I'm still not repenting because I'm not responsible for any of this shit. And so both of them are maintaining their innocence up until the last. And she ends up saying, she pleads to the people like, I didn't do this. We didn't do this. Please let me free. Please let me free. Yeah. And she's not getting anything from the audience in attendance, which is about 2,000 people. Wow. And she's not getting anything from the judges or the other people important. And so she just flips a switch. And this is a part that is both legend and real thing. She, according to the legend, says, cease. I will have none of it. Save your words for others. Sorry, this is so great. Save your words for others who want it. But if you have a message you want to send to hell, give it to me. I will carry it.
Dun, dun, dun.
And then she jumps from the fucking scaffold to immediately hang herself in her wedding dress because she's not giving nobody the satisfaction of killing her. That's fair. The legend. Dies instantly, the whole thing, and the crowd is just like, OM. Whatever, and that would have been the close, the legend of the Fishers, Lavinia.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, at the beginning I said that this is a person who's considered the first female serial killer of America, right? And what have we only talked about? 2 attempted murders. And
I'm gonna need a higher body count, please.
You need a little bit of a more body count, right? Okay. So again, I'm going to split this story. The first part was a legend, which, mind you, while great, it does not, like, how many times should be going, where are all the bodies? What's the serial killer bit? I'm so confused. Absolutely, this should be a thing. So now we're getting to the real story. So I'm going to rewind back to it is the economic downturn in Charleston. Very difficult time. 6 Mile House. People keep going missing after the last appearance of thing, which again could have happened at any part between Charleston and outside of Charleston. Like anything could have happened. There is a notorious highway gang that is believed to be stationed at 5 Mile House. But because people keep saying that they're not seeing anybody after 6 Mile House, there is the belief that it's possible that they're either interconnected or totally separate things.
Okay.
We get back to John Peoples. The story is essentially that he is coming from Charleston to go out of town, and he needs his horses watered, and he's only stopping for that. And when she tries to coax him in to the house and everything like that, he kind of softens a little bit, but then he gets a little bit suspicious. And then out of nowhere, Lavinia just fucking attacks him. And then all these men bum rush and, blah, 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 blah. And so he gets on his horse and heads back into Charleston to be like, these people just fucking attacked me for trying to run or something like that. And he didn't understand what was happening, which thus triggers the lynch mob, which would be the story of the lynch mob being like, oh, we're so fucking tired of this shit, burn it all. And they march down to 5 Mile and burn that shit down. And then certain bandits leave 5 Mile to go to 6 Mile, and some either perish and or are beat up by the mob. One person is believed to have been killed by the mob, but that's just a pin for a later part of the story. Someone that may have been in 5 Mile House at the time. They end up getting to 6 Mile House, and the story is essentially the same as what was a part of the legend. The David Ross gets left behind. The mob tries to rough him up. John says, no, I don't want a fight. We'll go ahead and comply. And then for whatever reason, the gang gets back to 6 Mile House to fuck up David. Essentially, that part is the same.
Yeah.
And they keep the house for a little while, but after the David story, after David makes it back to town, they're like, fuck this. And they do go back. They have arrested them by this time, but they do go back and burn the house. And they look at the surrounding grounds, and all they find is 2 bodies on the property in shallow graves. One is clearly freshly there, like within 10 days. And so within this 5 Mile, 6 Mile thing, the story is either immediately the same night or it's like days apart. So different parts of the story tells you that this event is happening like this or whatever. And so it's believed that the person that is in the shallow grave that was about 10 days, he was shot in the chest. He had long white hair. He's believed to be one of the gang members that was out 5 Mile House. And that if these gangs are connected, if Lavinia and John are part of the 5 Mile House gang, that they would have hid the body, which doesn't actually benefit them, or the mob killed him and was like, we're going to get in trouble if we are known to have killed people. So we're going to bury him here to tie him to Lavinia's house and stuff like that. The other grave that they found nearby was a shallow grave that was about 2 years old. That was clearly an enslaved woman, which did not raise any hackles because that was a very common thing. If you enslave someone and they acted wild, in your view, you could kill them without any punishment and you loosely bury them on your property, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. So the only bodies that are actually attributed to the Fishers are these that you can't necessarily claim they killed or did not kill.
Yeah.
But because of all this fancifulness or whatever, stories just start to go nuts. And this tale of like, they're vicious and attacking people, and so people are missing. No bodies, no trap door, nothing like that. Just people are missing. We might as well just attribute it to the Fishers. So the rest of the story is similar. The court case and all that other kind of stuff. The split is, did John stay underneath a boat for a couple of days, or did he immediately turn himself in? Those are the ones that are kind of hard to do. But essentially everything else is the same, leading up to the day they get hung. First of all, the house was burned down. So she wouldn't have been in her wedding dress because they wouldn't have had the wedding dress to go off of. The fact that there's no trap door found or anything like that in the remains, and it's not listed in the court case, there's no 30 bodies or however many missing possible people there are. Like some stories say 30, some say 150.
Whoa.
And mind you, the legend includes bodies in the cellar rotting. So 30 plus bodies just in the cellar on the spiked beds off to the side. Like they just didn't clean anything up after they had this elaborate thing. And I'm thinking, if you're hosting like a bed and breakfast or an inn or something like that in Charleston in the 1800s where refrigeration isn't a thing, you're going to tell me that people didn't smell that a mile coming and been like, I'm not staying in this house. But okay, fine. Sure. They had a murder cellar. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So we're back into, they're about to get hung. It would have been, at the time, they would put you in a shroud, like a white linen shroud, and stuff like that anyway, a hanging shroud or whatever. And so that would have been the white, the woman in white, the wedding dress, that would have been the white, but I'll tell you why there's such a huge legend after this. So all of that would have been the same. She did cuss and fight. John did try to repent, and both maintain innocence and apologize for everything at the same time.
Okay.
She's telling everybody to go fuck themselves. And
both reasonable courses of action.
I would say, you know,
it's gonna go one way or the other.
One way or the other. She does get hung quick, like it did kill her quickly, but the thing about her jumping off might not be the case. But
I like that bit.
I love that part, right? Like that's the part of the legend that's like, yes. But the quote is the same, except for a very, very important addition. Many journalists were present at the time, and her last words were printed in various things. So, but depending on the print, it was either what I said before: cease, I will have none of it. Save your words for others who want it. But if you have a message to send to hell, give it to me and I will carry it. It's beautiful. It's so fucking beautiful. Some prints do only have if you have a message you want to send to hell, give it to me and I will carry it. Some people only have that. Okay. Some people have the cease all the way through. But one in particular, and I really hope this is the real one because it makes the most sense. She says, if you believe me to be so evil and you have a message you want to send to hell, give it to me and I will carry it. So it's some version of that. At bare minimum, we can all agree, if you have a message you want to send to hell, give it to me and I will carry it. Which again, like, I'm an atheist and I chilled at that. I was like, fucking dope. If you're staring imminent death in the face and you have a fuck you everybody message, I am with it. Like that's all day. But if she says the one that got printed in like the main paper, which is if you believe me to be so evil, that tracks with her innocence, I think. In the story. Just like at this point, now that I really, because up until she's on the scaffold, she still doesn't think, she thinks she's going to get pardoned. A terrible part of the story is at one point the judge gets a piece of paper ran to him and he looks at it and then he just looks up and allows him to continue. And for a brief moment, she has hope thinking that she's about to get pardoned.
What did it say?
It was just like your wife says come home or some shit. Like it was literally like the most benign message after, had nothing to do with the thing. And so he does have to clarify, this has nothing to do with your case. This is a personal message. And she's just utterly crushed. And I think it's in that moment where all now hope has drained from her, that's when she's like, just fuck all of you. And that's why she says what she says. And so I'm holding to, if you believe me to be so evil. That's the version of that quote. That being said, cease, I will have none of it. Save your words for others who want it. I'm with that too. I'm massively there for it. But I feel like if you believe me to be so evil is an important part of that story. And maybe it's a version of like, cease, I will have none of it. Save your words for others who want it. If you believe me to be so evil and you have a mess, like if it's like that, that's clean. And I'll accept that too. And I'm going to walk away feeling like forever that's what she's going to have said. I have decided that's what she has said. So the story is in real life that she does die quickly and that John does struggle. Right. Because his thing was not tied as well. And you would think that's the end of the story in the historical context of it. 10 years later, there's a Scottish writer who comes into Charleston, and the story about the Lavinia Fishers and stuff like that is still very prevalent. And because it's still pretty close to people's hearts. And Charleston is notorious. A lot of the American South, a lot of the eastern part and southern part of the United States in particular are still are all very superstitiously ghosty type of people. So you're going to hear a lot of like ghost tales and shit like that throughout that part of the country. Apologize to people who believe in this shit. I don't believe in this shit. So everything to me is hilarious. But anyway, Charleston does believe in this shit. And so people believed that because Lavinia believed herself to be wrong, that she was haunting both the jail and the there's like a potter's cemetery, which is like, your enslaved people, your homeless, your your criminals who have family don't claim their bodies and stuff like that. It would be just sort of like unmarked graves. We all know that people are there. There's a marker to indicate there's a body here, but we're not saying who anybody is.
Okay.
So there's the belief that she would. Well, no. There's the belief that she's haunting the real cemetery, but because she was a criminal, she wouldn't have been buried there. She would have been buried in the Potter's prison, which nobody reports her haunting the Potter's prison. But she's in the jail. People would report being scratched at certain hallways where she would have been, or that they would hear screams or they would hear growls or something like that. The scratching thing is funny because people are always told the scratching myth, and then they come out and they go, I got scratched. Like it's one of those things. It's all about context and time. If you walk me through it, you don't tell me that shit, and I got scratched, and then you're like, oh, that's part of the legend. Here's proof that there's this historical legend about this. I might sit there and be like, I still don't believe this shit, but I'll listen to you. But if you tell me beforehand, and then a woman walks through that tour and comes out and goes, oh my God, I'm not going to believe you. But anyways, Charleston believes this. And to this day, evidently, there's still tours. Again, I've never heard about this case until I stumbled on it. But in Charleston, if you go there, you can tour areas in which the Lavinia's haunting ghost pops up. Mind you, she never pops up where 6 Mile House current would have stood. But she haunts the jail. She haunts the cemetery that she wasn't buried in. Okay, fine.
I mean, we don't know the rules of haunting. I mean,
I don't know the rules. I don't understand why they always haunt Victorian houses, but not Burger Kings. Because don't people get killed at Burger Kings on occasion? I don't understand how ghosts work. What I'm saying. There's reasons I don't believe this shit. So 10 years after this happens, people still, have the idea of stories, whatever. This Scottish guy who writes penny dreadfuls, for the American audience, what you might not know is like our equivalent would be Pulp Fictions, except for not spooky. The penny dreadfuls would be more spooky, whereas Pulp Fictions are more like gumshoe crime and stuff like that. But it's basically like a quick tale about something spooky. And they would sell them for pennies or whatever. Those didn't take off in the US, but I know they were big in Britain. The way Americans heard about it is there was a TV show called Penny Dreadful.
It was,
yeah. But people didn't also know that Penny Dreadfuls were the type of book. So for the Americans in the audience, that's what that was. So
it's not just a good drag name.
It's not honestly, right? Wouldn't that be, oh gosh, such a good drag name. So this guy comes who writes penny dreadfuls. He hears the tale and he decides to go fucking nuts with the story. So he produces a penny dreadful about the first American serial killer, Lavinia Fisher. He's the way we get to the trapdoor story, the spikes and the axe, the oleander tea. But he places David and John in the story. So he grounds it in a reality with the existence of the people who got away.
Time now. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. But he's the one who embellishes a thing, which again, had there been a trapdoor or any kind of thing, even if you burnt down the house, you would have found bodies.
Yeah.
You would have found a hole in the fucking ground. The other thing in Charleston at this time, cellars wouldn't have been common. They would have had above ground, like what would you call them? So they wouldn't have had a root cellar. They would have had like a pickling thing, which would have been above ground. So it would have been slightly cooler or something like that. But they would have had like canned foods and things or yard foods and stuff like that. But a root cellar would have been more common, more north, because of the weather. You got to get it. You got to get things under the ground and stuff like that. But in the South, where it's very hot and muggy, it wouldn't make sense necessarily. And so that's why they didn't do it. So having a cellar in Charleston, which is one of the most humid parts of the United States, even at that time would have been quite hot. And you just have bodies piling up there that you don't dispose of in any way, shape, or form.
And I guess
none of it tracks.
It makes sense why they went too big, why they didn't just do the full tea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. Because it was a penny dreadful. So this story, I guess, would have been known as the way you take a penny dreadful, but the people who read it in the US just started to absorb the story, and it became part of the story that is told about her. And so that's why she's So he's the one who says there's like 30 bodies or whatever and things like that, but or more. But there were stories. Why he was so fascinated because there were stories about people who would go missing. He just attributed that to their home.
But there's literally no evidence.
There's no whatsoever. So that's why, like, it's two different stories, right? There's the legend and there's the circumstantial true history is like there's enough to at least there's the court case, there's the paperwork, the charging documents, there's like alterations. So remember how I said like it starts out with like 4, but then eventually there's more people. At one point there's 12 people attributed to this gang and their names are added or crossed out in the list. Amazing. And so here's the next part of the story. Why was the Fishers a target? If they weren't actually serial killers, which they are now historically attributed to. Remember how I was talking about the economic downturn and how desperate things were getting? The governor of that time was trying to convince the U.S. military to build a naval base in Charleston. It would have been strategically a very good spot to do it, but at this time, Charleston was suffering so bad that they really needed an influx of cash. And what better way to infuse cash into your city, your town, your state, your country, but something related to war, military. And the prime location to place a base would have been
about 5 or 6 miles.
5 or 6 miles out of town. Yes. And they did try to get to the 5 Mile House, and 5 Mile House refused. They tried to get the 6 Mile House, but the 6 Mile House was roped in a thing that was so complicated because it used to be someone else's, and then the person who owns it wasn't in town, and all this other kind of stuff. But the Fishers were there, and so I'm assuming what's not part of the historical record, but just because I know like Murica, is that they tried to do the repossession of land that they do usually to Black and brown people, where they'll like build a freeway over someone's land. So they'll just like, there's a name for it, which is completely escaping my 45-year-old brain, but there's a thing that the government does. It's called something when they take your land away to reappropriate it for state reasons. I'll pop it up on the screen when I do the edit later once I figure it out, because I won't remember it now.
That fell out of my brain when I was telling this story.
Yeah, exactly. All that kind of stuff. Which if you're listening to the show, you don't get to see all the things that I do to like define words that we say when we're saying slang that's either American or British and or like shit like that. I can't remember what it's called, so I'm gonna put it in. So I think I would say historically that it's more possible than that they tried to get the land from the people, and the people were like, fuck you, no. And so they're like, okay, wait for it, and they try to do something really, nefarious to try to get their land, which again, Murica. This is a tale of oldest time in the country that I was born in. And so because of both the if you haven't been in your place for a year abandonment law reverting to the state, and because if you're convicted of highway robbery, which was a hanging case, very specifically, it's not like all hanging cases your property reverted. Highway robbery cases, your property reverted, because if they're viewing a pirate or a privateer or a robber or bandit as like the lowest form of life. Like you could actually get away with certain kinds of murder, but you wouldn't have been able to get away with highway robbery. So it's just like now, like if you mess with the federal government money, you would get prison. But if you like, murder someone and you're rich, you can kind of not go to jail for it, like stuff like that. Like they don't like you fucking with money, and that's very common in the States, and evidently even in 1819. And so they basically just devised a way to rope them into, because their charging documents don't match, their trial documents don't match. By the time they get into their conviction, their sentencing documents, that all of a sudden has highway robbery in it, and it's not a part of the first two stories. And literally there's no bodies even listed. Like eventually part of the story is, yes, there were 2 bodies found on the property, but one we're dismissing because it's an enslaved woman, and the other one is probably one of the bandits. It wasn't added to anybody's charge.
So like the whole thing then just becomes, there is no case at all.
There's no case. It's like literally probably one of the cases of wrongful conviction that is tied to state corruption, because what does end up getting built on that land is eventually a naval base. And where 6 Mile House would have been is currently a now old building, a defunct building that has been redone. But for a while, it was the Naval Hospital. And then it's been since updated, so it's still there's still something there standing there.
Yeah.
Parts of the old jail is still there, but all the parts of that have been upgraded too, and it's more of museum now than actual facility or whatever. But yeah, so like if you wanted to go on your Lavinia tour right now, you would go to the Naval Hospital and be like, this is where it happened, but you can't see shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's it. That's the story. It's so stupid because it's this amazing legend. This, okay, fine, real life story. But once you get to the corruption part of it, you're like, that's the reason that for 200 years, this bitch has been considered the first female serial killer in the United States. And it's some Scottish petty dreadful writer's fantasy. So you really have to
ruined her reputation.
He's ruined her reputation. In fact, like I'm so enamored with her fight at the end, especially given that I believe her to be most likely innocent of what they. I'm not saying she probably. Is it possible she was a robber? Maybe. Yeah, I don't fucking know. But like, that doesn't
the
seem
whole
to be
thing,
the case.
though, to paint her this way and describe her dusky beauty and how she enticed the men and and the flirting and that whole part of the story, though, just to lead up to trying to pin all this shit on her, is just, it feels like fuck men.
Yes, because also
like,
remember,
you not again.
I call this America's first female serial killer that never was, and her husband John.
Yeah, exactly.
Because essentially, John is as much a part of the story as she is, but the historical reputation of the crimes are all on her. And
of
even
course,
in the
because if you can paint a woman as evil, that's far more sensational.
But not a landowning man, right? And if she's known to be mixed race or suspected to be mixed race at that time, making her a devil would have tracked also with the historical record. But like state corruption, even in 1819, when the country is just barely getting its wheels under it,
So this does remind me of last week a little bit as well, right? Because we've got Phoolan, who, like, we were really sympathetic to her cause and her banditry and her Robin Hood shit and like making, taking revenge against these men who'd done all these awful things to her. And, but it also wasn't a straight up tale of murder, the way she was killing people, right? And now here we are. That this isn't a straight up tale of murder because she didn't murder anybody.
She probably didn't. Yeah, like there's literally nothing that mind you, like I found this book called 6 Miles to Charleston, which is written by a man named Bruce Orr. I did listen to a couple of podcasts because they kind of like I stumbled into it when I was she was already on my list. I had already started researching her, and then I stumbled onto a couple episodes. I was like, yeah, I'll listen to a couple things. And the way I think I listened to about 3 or 4. In each one, she's depicted totally different across the board. One that is just women, which I'm really surprised about. They giggle all the way through it, and they're legit. Like they love her. But they only tell the legend story. They don't tell any of the historical stuff. But they've also attributed like kinks to her because of the trap door and stuff like that. Like they go nuts that way. Another one actually gives more historical things of like talking about what Charleston was like. And it's a Southern based podcast. So it's like, here's some context stuff or whatever. And I found that to be the most informative because you got a bit of the legend and you got a bit of the history, but that's how I found out about the book. And then I went and downloaded the book and I read a lot of it. I didn't read all of it, but I read a lot of it. And then there was another one that basically just like, it was done by a man and it was just like, the duskiness, the flirtation, basically just a hoe that cuckolded her husband, like all kinds of stuff. And I'm just like, man, you can really tell like the bubble-headed girls, the person who actually kind of values the story and wants to try to tell as much of because I would view I think Lavinia in this case is as the victim. You
Yeah.
know, so like victimology, I think, is an important part of this that gets left out of a lot of these. And unfortunately, the reason why it gets left out of a lot of these is because we don't know much about the victims. We know tons about the murderers and not the victim.
Yes.
In this case, this quote murderess is, in my view, the victim. And so this other podcast was very thoughtful about it. And then this other one was just like gross and just like this murdering hoe and da 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 da. And I'm just like, ugh. And then to get to the book where we talk about the corruption of the state and everything like that, you know, I was so grateful to have that because that wasn't a part of my first written notes. I had to go back through and like update my notes to include this. And his book is considered like one of the most historically accurate versions of this because he mentions the Penny Dreadful writer. He mentions what was happening in the town at this time. He separates moments from the legend and so like wherever the story converges, which oddly is not much of the story converges. It's really just those last two, David and Peoples, like David Ross and Peoples, that are part of both stories. But yeah, like at the end of the day, this it's like so anticlimactic to get from this amazing legend to this like lukewarm reality and then just gross state corruption.
But I think, you know, we're looking at the way different people tell stories, right? And the way different people view victims, like, you know, like we're saying. And I just think it's super interesting that we're going to tell this story from the point of view of, you know, ethnicity, and, you know, and righting wrongs and like fucking men screwing over women, you know, which I think is an important, that's an important angle to take from this story, because surely that's what was going on. The corruption and the men.
Yeah. And, you know, the thing is, and it's sad because I was almost about to say, you know, and a lot of this would track for historical women in crime stories, that they would not have a whole lot of agency and stuff like that. But then I start, as I'm about to think to say that, I'm like, oh, wait, 2023. Let me list some ways in which women's aren't, you know, really, where their story isn't, you know, told thoughtfully. And I'm not saying like any of these women who do commit these kinds of, like, they're not all, you know, good or anything necessarily either, you know, there are, I'm not saying there aren't evil women out there. It's just that so many of the type of tales that I end up being attracted to retelling, which I think is probably the same for you, is you can see how it is either the men in their life and or the patriarchy itself is the reason this woman is caught up in the situation that she's caught up. Like in this case, what I think we have is a devoted husband in John, who is given a bad rep because he's a devoted husband, literally called a coward in so many materials, in which the justification for his cowardice is always in protection of Lavinia. So I'm taking that to be like, she had a good husband, and then she had you know, like shitty politicians and shitty men in power who allowed her to be cast in this way, so that by the time the Penny Dreadful guy pops up, it's Lavinia's story and not John's story. Or it's not Lavinia and John's story. It's Lavinia's story. And she was married at the time, and this guy named John, he was there too, you know, which takes away agency from him too. Like, you know, it's not a benefit to him or her for that to be the way their story is told. And you know, they didn't have children yet. They were only 27 and 28 when they were killed. So and, you know, who knows if they could have had or couldn't have had, because I guess maybe 27, 28 might have been quite old for her to have not had children at that point, at that time, probably. But, you know, there's no, you know, like there's no genetic legacy of them or whatever. They're just gone. They're just wiped from the face of the earth, and all their possessions and everything was burned to the ground.
That's one of the things I was going to say. Like I was going to ask you was, you know, have they got any descendants, and how are their descendants faring? And I want to know what happened to them, but that's
they
it.
Didn't have any.
They didn't have any.
So yeah,
it's their story.
It's a tragic story, right? Because like in the end, in my view, given what is available, I can't trace any particular crime to them.
Yeah,
because even the story about David Ross getting beat up, the woman he describes does not does not match the description of Lavinia. So it's most likely the other woman that was there who was known to be bigger than Lavinia. And maybe it was the case that the gang from 5 Mile went to 6 Mile and forced them to house them. And John and Lavinia are just there, you know, because they owned it. And it's really all these other people that were in it. But John and Lavinia end up getting not only just like arrested and included, but literally the main people, because they were the only 2 people who weren't offered bail. Everybody else was offered bail. They're the only 2 people hung. I think Wayward ends up getting shot somewhere later down in his life or whatever. And it's just, it to me, it just seems that it's a cute story to tell about the first female serial killer who literally does not have a single body attributed to her. Not a one, you know, even the ones that are on her property cannot be attributed to her specifically. Also, and this is just a weird little side note, no one ever says if there's oleander anywhere nearby. Which I feel like even in Graham's story, we had laurel plants in the outskirts of Broadmoor, right? So you could tie the possibility of this thing existing. And I don't know how common oleander would have been at the time outside of people maybe knowing that that you could turn it into a poisonous tea. But there's like literally none of the legend ties to anything that you could say she probably did something. It doesn't seem like she or John did anything.
That's so awful.
It's sad, right? So I didn't know that this was going to be like back to back. We would have 2 stories that weren't like straight up like clean murder. But I'm kind of into this idea also of just like, you know, this stuff is not always what.
Yeah, it's not always what it seems, is it? Yeah.
And it's complicated because the way in which I both love the version of Lavinia at the end of the legend. And mourn kind of what happens to her and John in the reality of it. I have complicated feelings about these people who died 200 years ago. You know, like
yes, I agree.
It's so wild. But yeah, that's the tale of.
That seems like something, you know, that's a good slogan for a t-shirt, you know, the quote, you know, if you've got a message, I'll take it to hell for you.
I mean, it's so fun. Like I can picture in the way that like the basic housewifey decorations with signage around your house could be translated into this like I will take your message to hell thing. Like I would love to have that hanging in my house in like the most beautiful decorative benign way.
Dance and like no one's watching. I'll take your message to hell, bitch.
Someone walks past and they're just like, what is this? And we're like, you know, listen.
Excellent.
I like murder, but I like pumpkin spice too. You know, we can all be basic sometimes. But yeah, I was really caught up. And, you know, and I didn't expect to be doing research in the way that I'm doing it now. Like the first ones, it was like, oh, I got fascinated and I just kind of went crazy down a rabbit hole, which tracks, you know, I'll definitely get kind of fixated and stuff like that.
These stories though, they're more involved and it takes you down twists and turns. You're ending up not where you expected to start out, are you?
I thought I was going to tell a story about a woman in a wedding dress who hung herself essentially while screaming like, I'm going to take your message to hell. That's how I got in the room. You know, like that's what brought me to the dance. And in the end, I'm just like, fuck government, you know?
Always.
It was not the part of the story I was anticipating uncovering. And so I'm afraid for the future as the show develops of what I'm going to be getting into, because like I've been in bed rest like on and off for the last month, and I've been sitting there like in what I've referred to as bed desk. I have like I have this desk over me. I got my computer, and I'm just like, you know, I'm trying to balance reading about stuff like this alongside like doing work, liberation work and stuff for Palestine and the research I'm doing there. And the shut off is very strange. It's like, I'm going to pause murder right now and pay attention to genocide. And now I'm going to pause genocide and pay attention to murder. It's very weird. is a real weird time, because that's not how this show started. Like we started recording this before all this stuff went down, and
then we were just, happy-go-lucky girls looking for a murder story.
you know what I'm saying? Like, I just saw a mug that I ordered. I sent it to my friend in the US so that I can get it eventually, because I couldn't get it here. That just says murder shows and comfy clothes, and I was like, that's me in a nutshell.
That's where we live right now.
I'm literally always in pajamas. I don't go outside, and I watch murder documentaries all the time.
Yeah.
So,
and I like that we're bringing different flavored ones. These are not your run-of-the-mill murder podcast stories. I guess murder is like a box of chocolates.
You really don't know. Yeah.
I don't know where I was going with that. Sorry.
It's
turned into a Forrest Gump moment.
That's it, right? Like I don't know, when you and I started talking about doing this, that we thought we would end up down this path that would take us to like, fucking kill all these rapist men and stuff like that, and be an example for the women of your country, or like, let's undo this bad rap that you have, and I downplayed the ghost part of it because that's my vibe, but like when I started to look into the ghost version of this story, is fucking huge. Like, people who are ghost people, they fucking know about her. I don't know shit about her because I'm not a ghost person.
Yeah.
But
she's in the wedding dress, and that you can.
Yeah. So like, if people think they see her, they're seeing a woman in a wedding dress.
Of course they
scratching. Why is she scratching people? I have no idea. I don't know how that ties to the story itself.
Maybe the nails. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe because she was fighting at the end. To not get put up on the scaffold.
She's like a wildcat.
Yeah, maybe something like that. Or maybe it's just like, bitches be scratching, and that's why this, like that stereotype of like, that's how women fight, or something like that.
Yeah.
And so again, like, for every part of the story that you start to get into, if you're like us, you're gonna be like, this is some nonsense, right? Like, the way they've given language to her, or the way they've attributed some behavior, it's all like this historically stereotypical downplay of women and taking away some of their agency. And I hope, in telling the story the way that I told the story, that anybody who listens to this versus one of the other things that's out there, and there's not many episodes, I there's very few, maybe 7 or 8 that I saw actually listed, but like only 3 or 4 that I listened to. That like, she has agency in this story, because for me, this bitch has agency. I mean, she fought at the end for her innocence, which I believe she had.
Well, I think if she were wandering around graveyards and ex-prisons in her wedding dress, I don't think she would haunt or scratch us. I think she would thank us for telling her story.
Like, we might get a high five, or like a I know you're not a hugger, pat, or something like that. Sometimes I don't like to hug.
I'm non-corporeal anyway. I can't hug you even if I wanted
to. Like, girl power, some shit like that. I don't know.
She's like that. I'll see you in hell.
Yeah.
We're like, yeah, we'll see you there.
Yeah. She's like, do you have a message? Because I'm already here.
I could come up with a message for some people who are probably down. Not that I believe in that kind of thing.
Like, I don't believe in it either, but like, if it's there, here's the thing. I don't believe in any of that stuff. If it's there, what I hope is there, or who I hope is there, sure, I'll send you a message. You know what I'm saying? Thanks, Lavinia, for passing that on to me.
Yeah.
That being said, I would hope that if something like that was real, which again, I don't believe in, that whatever power would be like, this bitch is innocent, and
exactly.
Send her to the good place. So that's the tale of the America's first female serial killer, or was she? That never was.
Amazing.
And John,
and John.
John.
And John. Yeah. So we're getting
wild.
I like it. We're
reduced so small in your story, right?
Yeah.
Like, and John.
We're getting the Johns. There's a lot of Johns.
A lot of Johns.
There's people legging it all over the place.
All over the place, legging
and there's some pretty badass women.
So far,
the themes.
we've got some strong, because even like Mayako, which again, horrible story, but like in some of the cultural contexts, I get it and makes sense. I still wouldn't have, neglected.
Yeah.
the babies, I would have done something slightly more humane and swift, I guess.
Mm,
But even that, like, it starts in a place that's like, it's gonna be bad. So
yeah.
I'm gonna do this bad thing so
Yeah.
that it's not worse, I guess.
Yeah.
There's a mindset there.
Yeah. I think it's interesting as well talking about women being hanged, because in English we say hanged. We're not supposed to say hung. We say hanged, which is
Interesting.
technically sounds wrong, but like that's what we're supposed to say. So like, we talked about, Kate being like, I was saying she was the first woman.
She was the first, yeah.
Yeah. And so that's an interesting comparison here, because we're talking about how you can't hang an unmarried woman. And that feels really dodgy to me, in terms of, I feel like some man sat there and was like, well, we can't waste a virgin, or like, we can't waste a perfectly good woman. Right?
Because like,
she's not been used yet. We can't kill her.
Been
what
used
the
yet.
fuck is that about?
So
Sorry.
what's weird about that? No, you're
Outrageous.
absolutely right. Because what I was thinking too is, and I hate that this was my first thought, but patriarchy lives within all of us, right? Is that when I read, you could not hang an unwed woman, I thought, why wouldn't it be that you couldn't hang a married woman?
Yeah.
Like that was the first thought in my head. And it really had to do with the idea of just like married women were slightly more valued to a degree, like even
because
though
they
not
were owned by a man,
because they were owned by a man, so being tied to the man gave them a sense of value. And so I would view, like, given the way our history is written, that I would view that an unmarried woman would essentially, in the eyes of law, have kind of no value. But if she's
got
a virgin,
potential to be claimed and then possessed,
and so that like that's it. That's so, it's such a gross part of for any of these laws that are like kind of specifically geared towards women, there's always some real gross sexual or possession type of line behind it. So everything's so disappointing all the time. Like, you think you're just going to tell a simple retelling of a murder story. You're like, patriarchy, state corruption, virgins are value that married women don't have. Like, come on.
Yeah.
So terrible.
Tune in next week for another exciting episode.
But sorry, so this one we did go quite long, but again, I was telling basically two different stories in one person's story, so I apologize about that. But don't forget to follow us on the social medias, the Matcha Masala Murder on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. And if you're following us on the audio only, please check us out on Spotify and follow us. Make sure you hit the plus button. People, hit that plus button. If you like a show, hit the subscribe. It costs you nothing, and it actually could benefit us.
Absolutely.
in some way.
So yeah. Matcha and Masala is produced and hosted by Sharmane Fury and Rhia Kaur.
This is a Main Hustle Media production in association with Virtual Reality Studios. All stories are researched to the best of our ability, with information freely available to the public.
This podcast is intended for entertainment purposes, and due to the nature of true life crimes, some information remains inaccessible and new information can come to light after recording.